So, you got yourself a jam, huh? Well, let's try to get you out of a jam. The first thing you want to do is A, throw your gun on the burn pile, cursing and screaming. Uh, B, wait till Sunday and call Mason just as he's about to go to sleep. You take a nap. Uh, C, slap the hell out of it. Or D, put it on eBay. Now, if you chose B, that's the wrong answer. The first thing you should do is slap it, actually. And I'll show you why that helps. But, holding it with your right hand or left hand if you're a southpaw, however you want to do it, just slap it with the other hand, you know, holding it upright. I can't do that right now because I'm holding a camera. But just give it a good solid whack. And a lot of times that'll clear the jam. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's have a look under the hood. If slapping it did not work, and you probably got a problem with the BB getting stuck between the spring at this part of the polymer right here. Let me get something to point with. Now, I started cutting off this piece of the shaker because what happens, there's a little pivot here, and this goes up and down as your clutch gear turns around and hits it. Now, also, I've shaved your ears way down on these. And by the way, this only applies to these Superbirds that I've built. And this is the thicker spring that really helps to mitigate jams. So, if you still have that part on there that comes over like this, you might want to cut that off. Because I didn't used to do it. I did everything under the sun before I started cutting those off. But it's not going to hurt anything if you do, and it will help you out on jams. Because when you have that piece of metal hanging over here, it gives you 3 points of contact. It gives you the base of it right there, this corner of the polymer frame, and every once in a while this spring as it cycles a BB through. So that spring, the shaker unmodified, and this corner can give you 3 points of contact. And you don't want 3 points of contact. That's why I ended up cutting these off, so you only have 2 points of contact. The reason we changed the size of the spring was to change the geometry in here. And it seems to be working out very well. Now, if you're using Daisy BBs, after I have told you to not use Daisy BBs, you might as well not even own one of these things. Let me explain why. Again, they look pretty, don't they? They're not. not. They're horrible. I'm looking for one that's particularly bad to show you. Ah, a diamond among the rough. Okay. Doesn't get any better than that. I'm going to try to zoom in on some of these. Okay. In the center, you see that pitting? Well, these BBs are full of that type of shenanigans. And each one of those little pits has the potential to get stuck moving through the mechanism. And I only test with Daisy BBs as a worst case scenario. Dear Lord, what's going on with that one? Is that an optical illusion? Yeah, to the naked eye, they look fine and pretty. But ever since they were bought out, and I can't remember the name of the airgun company, they've just gone to shit. I think they're making them on the same machinery that they make copper heads on. That one right there looks like an old one. And they used to be so wonderful and cheap, but they're not anymore. They're fine for a Daisy Red Ryder BB gun or 1200 round a minute chip mod, but not for Superbirds. See how close we can get. All right. So that's why I recommend shooting quality BBs like the Hornady Black Diamonds, because anywhere you have one of those little craters on it, you're going to have the potential for it to hang up in the feed mechanism. Before we take a look at the Black Diamonds, we're going to have a look at some copperheads. Huh. What is this? Devilry. Here's a small sample size of the copperheads. Blah. And the reason you can see this better on the copperheads is because they're not quite as shiny. But you see all that rust? What that rust does is it gets in your seals and it wears them. But this is why copperheads don't like to work in my builds. Here's the Hornady Black Diamonds, a slightly larger sample size. Another problem with the other BBs is their size uniformity, and I'll get into why that's a problem. But you see how much smoother and uniform these are, which also helps with accuracy, because if you think about the pits on the other one, they're kind of like pits on a golf ball, and as they fly through the air, they will create low pressure points and guide the BBs in the direction that the pits are located in. By the way, the name of the company that bought Daisy is Gammo, so thanks for fucking up a good thing, Gammo. These BBs are much higher quality. These are just about the same quality as Daisy used to be, but they're twice as expensive. They say that these are anodized. I'm gonna call bullshit on that. These, I believe, are cold blued, and that's probably why they smell like stale milk. One more thing about BBs. They're made out of steel. Some of them have coatings on them. Most of them do, I believe. But copperheads are not copper. I'm not having that conversation with anyone ever again. I've actually had people try to argue with me that, no, they're copper. They're copper. No, they used to be. No, they were never copper. They've always been steel. If beating on the side of your magazine didn't work, and it often can, another place it can get stuck where you're not going to be able to shake it loose is, again, if you're using shitty BBs, they're not going to, some of them aren't going to be able to pass into this tube. There's a way you can check this. Before you go and take your magazine all apart, what you need to do, take it out of the gun, obviously, and look in here to see if there's a BB. Now, if you have any kind of magnet mod in here like Ray used to do, he even used to put magnets and set screws up in the top here for BB centering. It's going to kind of throw you off, but if this looks unmolested on either side and there's no set screw above the BB, look in here and see if there's a BB in battery. Now it should be sitting in there a little bit HUD. Don't freak out. That's just how it's designed. It's designed that way to hold the BB in there before it's fired. If that little cup weren't above the BB, you would have BBs running out all over the place. That's another reason I'm not really a big fan of BB centering. So if you have confirmed that there are BBs in here but it's not firing, this could be one of two things. This could be that you have a jam in your barrel. In that case, you need to run something down it to free the BB. If you don't have a BB in your barrel and you've got a BB in here ready to shoot, most likely, not 100%, your clutch could be too tight. Now, because the gun, just the way it runs, there could be a BB up there and there not be a jam in the barrel, and the clutch might not be too tight. So, let's say you don't have a BB in here, but there's some in the tube. You can move it back and forth and you can hear them running up and down here, and when you turn it upside down, you can see a BB there. that is an indicator that you have a jam inside the magazine. Most likely your jam will be here or here. If it's here, it's because the BB is way oversized. These tubes have an inner diameter of 0.177, and a BB is supposed to have an inner diameter of more like 175. So being 2 thousandths off, and it does happen with shitty BBs, it'll get stuck there. And as you if you keep firing, what'll happen is BBs down to about here will get venturied out of the barrel at low velocity. So you'll have BBs, say from right here all the way down to the jam, that won't fire unless you turn the gun upside down. And if you're not aware of the possibility that you might have a BB stuck here, and you get all the BBs out of it and put them right back in your hopper, guess what's going to happen when it comes to that BB again? It's going to get stuck right there again. Now, if you have a jam right here, which is nowhere near as likely as it used to be with all this mitigation in here, most likely your clutch is too loose. These heavier springs like to be a little tighter, and that does a couple of things. If there is a jam here, there's actually going to be a lot of fighting going on in here. If your gun's running perfectly, there's going to be a lot more fighting going on there if you use crappy BBs. Now, if you use a good quality BB, you have a nice smooth spring here. There's no divots in your spring. There's no damage to your spring here. It's nice and smooth. It's going to roll right over that smooth surface. But if it's pitted and rusty, like those BBs, that pitted, rusted surface is going to hang up at multiple points in here. So if everything looks good in here, another problem that you might have, this I never finished fixing this one. This was an idea I had to try to prevent something else from happening in here. With the smaller spring, what would happen in here is they wouldn't, using the crappy BBs, I didn't realize that Daisy'd gone to crap for a long time, and that was a real big headache. What would happen was the spring would roll the baby up and press them into this area right in here. It would press up on that, and they would get jammed on the spring. That's why I started filling them with epoxy, and this one is going on its second fill. You may have seen this from a video a while back. I never got around to redoing this epoxy, but the second time I epoxied it, I didn't get the mix right. It was a little bit soft, so I got a little bit of flex in here, and BB started to jam in here, between here and the spring. So that's another place to look for. If that part is bowed up and you see BBs are wedging between the spring and that part, that needs to be addressed. But like I say, with these thicker springs, it's not really an issue. Now, if everything looks good as far as that's concerned, it could be that you don't have enough clutch tension. This right here is your clutch assembly. The way this works is this metal plate stays stationary as you see this that flat spot right there. Okay, there's a hole in that metal plate to match up with that flat spot. So yeah, it will, the metal plate will turn with that bolt, and the gear is free, and that spring pushing on the metal plate, pressing on the gear, is your clutch. So the polymer gear will slip on the metal plate, and if you don't have enough tension in there as your motor is turning this drive assembly, your clutch is going to break free before it can power through any jam here. To tighten or loosen your clutch, you need to hold this still and turn this round nut. The way I do that is I'll get a pair of vice grips and lock this down, and a pair of pliers, and turn that. Just like so. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. And while we're on this, this is also how you can check your clutch tension. When I modify this gear, the reason you get a syringe with some silicone grease is because this is a way that you can lubricate it without having to disassemble the thing and lose your clutch tension. I also drill a small hole under one of those little ears that hits your BB shaker. So if you take the needle off of your syringe and get a trigger gauge, you have it braced with vice grips, you put your trigger gauge along this point as high up as you can get it on the metal shaft, and then pull, see where the clutch slips, and usually that's it, 8 ounces. You might need to have it a little bit tighter than that, and this is a way that you can get a ballpark figure of, you know, how tight you are, how loose you are. It's honestly, it's not the best way. Sometimes I just do it by feel and the way the gun is shooting when I get these things tuned up. But if you don't have a trigger gauge, you should probably buy one. But when you're adjusting this clutch, just do it quarter turns at a time. If your clutch is too tight, you take your magazine out and you don't have a jam in the barrel, but there's a BB up there in your valve body. What is happening is it's being pressed in that pocket so hard that when you fire the gun, it's not able to come down and out. Another thing that you will notice at extreme fire rates, what will happen is, because your clutch is so tight and it's pushing so hard on that, your motor is pulling extra current, and it's going to rob your solenoid of current to actuate this valve. So your motor will continue to run and you can hear it, but your solenoid is not going to have enough juice to open the valve if you're running 14,500s. And I have seen it happen with 5-cell 18,650 packs. Let's say your clutch is too loose. It is possible for this nut to loosen up. Now, when I get done with them, I put semi-permanent Loctite on here to keep that from happening. But the way the gun is going to act is it'll work fine at, say, single shots and maybe up to a certain rate of fire, and then you're just going to have intermittent shots and air shots. What's actually happening in here is you're having the air push down on the BBs, and the BBs are going to go up and down and try to catch up, and some of them are going to make it up there, and then they're going to get launched at full velocity. Some of them are going to get picked up by the Venturi effect when they're, say, down here, and those are going to come out at a much lower velocity. And what can actually happen is when one of these BBs does get Venturi'd out and then one comes in behind it at full velocity, it'll actually hit the slower BB that's in front of it, and it'll go off into God knows where. And then in that case, you just need to tighten your clutch up a quarter turn at a time. Besides all that, there's a couple other ways you can have a failure in here. Running the smaller spring. This is actually the one that I'm still running, and this is the tempered version. They did it a little bit better than the non-tempered. With the non-tempered, if you have one of my older builds, I would put this slot in the auger shaft right there, and the end of the spring was bent inward, and it would go in that. And that was to keep the spring from compressing, because when you have two coils under this part compress, that would shove a BB up into that, and that can actually cause that part to break. So the solution was to just put a slot in there and bend the spring, the end of the spring, to go in there. That way it could only compress so far. What would sometimes happen is in here, somewhere in here, one of these first two coils, I think it was right here, the two coils would get smushed together to the point where they would not allow a BB to pass. So then we went with the thicker auger spring. You don't have that problem with it bending, and you don't have to anchor it in here. Now, either one of them, it's less likely with the thicker spring. If your clutch is way too tight, hang on. If your clutch is way too tight and this is not right, it can pop out and ride over your cog. And you can take it apart and it'll look just fine because it's gone back in there. What you want to look for around the cog are marks to see if it's been sliding around. And if you have one of these guns with the thinner spring in it and you start getting problems, just let me know and I'll send you one of these thicker springs, because they do work really, really well. So that's pretty much every way that I've ever seen these things jam. And this little part right in here has been the bane of my existence. That's not to say that it can't be overcome with modifications, but again, this was never designed to shoot anything more than a 6 round burst um, at 600 rounds a minute, which it does absolutely fine. It works just great up to 1200 rounds a minute, but beyond that, you really got to get in here and start tinkering around with it to get it to work, and adding voltage and all that stuff. Now, in our gun, all this is metal, the way it should be. So, I haven't had any jams in there, and the one that I've been wailing on for a few weeks now. Do I expect to have problems? I don't know, but I will tell you this. This part in our gun can easily be replaced, and it's metal. So if I were to spend a whole lot more time messing around with these guns, I would go back to this. That sits in here like so, and I would fit it for one of these bigger springs, because this was made for the smaller spring. It doesn't want to fit, but yeah, if I had infinite amount of time, that's the direction I would go. And this is the same material as this stainless steel tube, which is a 1.77 inner diameter. I think they're called pipettes. So you can find these pipettes online in different dimensions. These just allow for a little bit of slop for abnormally shaped BBs getting up in there. Alright, that's about all I have for this video. Later.